Welcome back to PJ Takes 5. Today is Friday, August 15th, and the second week of preseason football is officially here. But we'll start the show off with a couple notes on programming stuff here. So just wanted to say that I can see that a couple more people are tuning in each and every show, which is super exciting. As long as you guys can listen, that's the best. There's not a lot of visual elements of the show right now, so put it on, listen to it while you're cooking or doing the dishes or doing some chores around the house. That'd be super appreciated. Walking your dog around, anything just to listen to it, because I know a lot of times people listen to the first end but maybe not the back end so much. So just want to say, as long as you can listen, that's super appreciated. And if you have any ideas for stuff that you want to see talked about or covered, go ahead and comment that. I know right now it's Chicago focused and football focused, so once the Bears get going, that's going to be a big part of the show, you could assume. But just anything you guys want to see talked about, I'm willing to consider and work into the show. And with football season coming up, it's the preseason for the teams and the players, and it's also the preseason for me and anybody doing any sort of media. So trying to figure out how I'm going to attack football weeks. I still like the Friday episode release, with Tuesdays kind of recapping the week, and especially that Monday night game that happened the previous night, and then Fridays kind of previewing the week and talking about that Thursday night game that happened the night before. So it's going to get a little funky at some points because I'm currently slated to have classes Thursday night, so got to sneak in some football watching maybe in class, which is not something I love to do. And then that first week, Tuesday show might be a little funky because the Bears play Monday night against the Vikings, and I'm actually going to that game, so it might not be possible to come back and record after that. So it'll probably be recorded before Monday Night Football, which means they'll air Tuesday, that week one episode, and I'll either be very happy or very sad, and you guys will know before I know, really. But yeah, going to be a lot of NFL stuff at the fall. College football is going to be in there. I'm definitely not as big of a college football guy, although I grew up in a place that's big on college football and not NFL. I like it. I played college football, not anywhere close to, the Division I FBS level, so I'm always interested in it. It'll definitely be a topic on the show, but the NFL weekly recaps and previews will definitely take priority over college ball. So for other sports like MLB, NBA, NHL, when the MLB postseason is happening, that's going to be a topic that we're going to talk about. Same with NBA postseason, NHL postseason, opening weeks, opening nights, all-star breaks. It's going to be a part of it still, but for as long as football is going on, it's going to be very heavily football related. And then any human element stories I think are really interesting, and there's a lot to talk about always. Sometimes that can be really good stuff, sometimes that can be not so good stuff, but I kind of like that side of it more than just straight up recapping. This team won 14-10, and if you guys are watching this, you probably watched whatever team you root for and already know stuff like that. Looking more for some editorialization and kind of my opinions on stuff as we work through the sporting news cycle. And then the last thing, I end the show off with media reviews, and as football kind of kicks more up here, that might not be part of the show anymore. Maybe if I see something specifically that I want to talk about, I could add that in at the end, but probably going to ditch that at some point and either go with 6 subjects or 5 subjects that I can speak a little more about each time. So I really like doing the media reviews. It makes me watch stuff that I've had on my list but haven't really gotten able to watch, but probably not going to take priority over talking about football games and MLB postseason and all these different events that are on the horizon here. So just want to say thank you again to everybody listening. And again, if you comment whatever you want, whatever you think would make the show better and things that you want to hear. So with that said, we'll head into our first actual sports topic here, NFL preseason week 2. Like I said at the top of the show, starts Friday night, and I've picked out 5 games in chronological order here that I want to talk about. So first up on Friday night, we got Titans at the Falcons. These two teams made news earlier this week on Wednesday when Michael Penix Jr. landed at the bottom of the joint practice scuffle, and actually on a couple different news sources, they messed up his name, Penix Jr., in the obvious way to make that go viral. But definitely a scary situation for a practice to have your starting quarterback, who already has some injury history, end up at the bottom of the pile. He thankfully stood up and walked off and was totally fine, but he's not going to be playing this weekend. Kirk Cousins, who hasn't really played, might end up playing. I know it's kind of like a game time decision. The coaches haven't really said yet. And he's in a weird spot where he came in as a starter and then Penix got drafted, and maybe a team like the Browns could say we need to add somebody who's a little more high-end, and not saying Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback anymore, but I still think he's probably a little better than what they got on the roster. In terms of an established veteran, obviously you have Flacco over there, who's a Super Bowl champion and has been doing it for a long time, but it wasn't that long ago that Kirk was one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL and had that Achilles injury. So maybe we'll see him play, if for nothing else than for him to raise his own stock and draw some intrigue from a different team, maybe giving him a little bit better chance to start the season somewhere else in Atlanta. It's going to be a decent test for Atlanta's edge rushers. You got that duo of Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. from the first round of the draft in April. Titans got another team that's invested heavily in the O-line, whether it's J.C. Latham or Peter Skoronski, who they drafted recently, or Dan Moore, the tackle they signed this past offseason. They got some good pieces on the O-line there. That's a big part of the Callahan's offensive scheme down there is getting established in the trenches, and the O-line is going to be a good test for those young Atlanta DNs just to see progress support and how they're doing. And then, again, on the Titans side, it's another good chance for Cam Ward to play an ankle he's got. He had a pretty good outing. Last week, he had that 3-and-out and then led the touchdown drive and was pretty efficient throwing over the middle. But just kind of want to see that next step. Can't take a whole lot out of the preseason, but he's probably going to play a little more than just 2 drives. So seeing if he can string anything together, drive to drive, back to back. If the defense can go out, see him once, adjust, and then he comes back out and does more, that could be a little more encouraging than what we've already seen, which is encouraging in and of itself. But just getting him more reps right for week 1. He's in a weird spot where he's the number 1 pick and nobody's really talking about him, and he's got a lot of talent. So I'm hoping that he does pretty well here in Atlanta and continues to make a name for himself. And he's a player that people are paying attention to this fall. Number 2, on Saturday night, we got the Jets and the Giants. So from the Jets side, another look at their O-line versus a pretty good Giants D-line. We can talk about both these units actually for a second here. I've said a lot about the Jets O-line. They got so many young, talented players that they've invested in recently. The Giants D-line between Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter has a lot of top-end talent, especially out of Carter, who was the 3rd overall pick last April. So this will be a good test on best here to see how everything goes. It's still early with the Giants D-line. Like I said, Abdul Carter, the rookie, but they might already be in the running for one of the better positional groups in the NFL. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I had the Vikings wide receivers between Jefferson and Jordan Anderson, and throw TJ Hawkinson in there, who's technically a tight end. Those pass catchers are a great group. Philadelphia and Detroit both have monster O-lines. The Rams have a great receiving room with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, who they signed. Cincy's receivers are obviously amazing too. And then the Steelers D-line between TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, who's got his own contract situation. But the Giants D-line is already on a short list of really scary units top to bottom across the league that you don't want to run up against. And I think that the Jets offense will have a good test against that, seeing if Fields can stay in the pocket and make some throws against that group, seeing if he can extend plays against that group, just seeing if they can run the ball against that group to start out with. That'll be a good test. And then from the Giants offensive side of it, can their quarterbacks, build from the success they had last week against Buffalo's backers mostly? Really good showing for Jackson Dart, who was super efficient and had that 1 touchdown bomb down the left sideline. Pretty good showing from Russell Wilson, who's slated to be their week 1 starter and keep the pressure off Dart for as long as he can. And then Jameis, who's, always good, but is always Jameis, see, what he can do in the preseason when he gets his snaps. He's going to do something. So just seeing how those guys play, and if does one guy struggle, do a couple guys really step up? Does it in all way shake out? If not the QB depth chart, the timeline of when you expect to see guys, because, like I said, Russell Wilson's going to be that week 1 starter. But if they're struggling and Dayball's, the tea leaves are saying that he's going to get fired, it might make sense for him to bring out Dart, hope that he plays well enough, and then go back to Giants ownership and say, you can't fire me. I got this young kid, and I'm the right guy to teach him, which I don't think is an inaccurate statement. I think Dayball's a really good offensive head coach and a great quarterback developer. And I think it might end up in a situation like that where he ends up having to play a little more than the team wants him to, just so that everybody there can keep their jobs a little bit. But then obviously just the crosstown element of it. This is usually a game they play in the preseason just because it's easy and there's not a lot of logistical nightmare situations for everybody involved in that side of the game. But we see the crosstown series in baseball between the Cubs and the White Sox and the Yankees and the Mets. We see Lakers, Clippers in the NBA. It's obviously a thing whenever 2 teams dueling over the same market play each other. And the Jets and Giants, I'm sure there's a lot of Jets fans hating Giants fans and Giants fans hating Jets fans in the New York area. But you look at those 2 fan bases and they're basically the same people, right? And neither of those teams are super successful. If the Giants were as successful as the Patriots, and there's a real big brother, little brother dynamic, could be one thing, but these 2 are pretty evenly matched now and over the course of history. So it was definitely a game we'll be paying attention to, and if nothing else, just to see who wins the bragging rights in New York there. In game number 3, we got Jaguars at Saints on Sunday at noon. So the big story, just Travis Hunter, not only their first pick this year, but kind of their first round pick next year as well, because they traded that pick away to move up and get him. Played both sides, which we kind of expected in the first preseason game there, but didn't do a whole lot on our side. He had 2 catches on offense and then played just a few drives on defense. So see if they can kind of ramp him up. He's got only so many plays, and you don't want to burn too many of them in the preseason when you have plans for him to play both sides like that. But you got to give him a little bit of role one way or the other. If he's an offensive specialist and then plays some defensive snaps, that could be one thing, or vice versa. But if figuring out what he can do on our side and maybe which side is his best side moving forward, I think would make a lot of sense. And the really interesting is Tyson Campbell, their cornerback that they've had for a couple years now, is not slated to play on defense. So this could be the game where you see him more as a primary cornerback and then spot plays here and there on offense. But I'm sure he'll get a good run, and it's not going to take much for him to kind of take over the internet in the sporting world. If he gets a couple pass breaks up and a couple first downs, it'd be amazing of itself. If he got a pick and a receiving touchdown in the same game, people would be destroying themselves with the hype. So definitely a player to watch on that Jags offense and defense. And then for the Saints, just their quarterback battle is still going on here. Spencer Rattler is going to be the week 1 starter over Tyler Shuck, who they drafted in the second round there. But I know when you have a competition like this, sometimes coaches decide to do a player start one game and then have another player start the next and see how they respond to that, and then see how each player goes against the ones, how each player goes against the twos, and so on. So it could make sense to see Shuck be that first guy up, just because I know Spencer Rattler was the first guy up last week. Shuck is just such an interesting pick and young quarterback where he's already 25, 26. He doesn't have a extensive college career, transferred a lot, got injured a lot. But he's supposed to be a really high level processor on the football field, which is just so important to that quarterback position. So the Saints don't have a lot to work with around the quarterback. You got Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara and a couple good linemen up and down, but really you need a guy back there who you're comfortable in making the right decisions, even if other people kind of aren't. Kellen Moore, the new head coach, isn't on the hot seat at all just because he just got there, and they're not in the greatest spot for him right now. He's kind of Tyler Shuck's kind of Kellen Moore's guy just because they came out at the same time. So I'd expect to see him at some point in the season. It might not be week 1. That might go to Rattler, but it'll be interesting to kind of see how those quarterbacks can kind of shake out against the Jaguars there and see if anything changes in that depth chart battle. Number 4, we got Bills at Bears on Sunday night. I don't know when we started doing Sunday night games for the preseason, but this is the one, I guess. And the big news is that Caleb Williams and most of the offensive stars are set to play for the first time this year. So a lot of expectations and a lot of excitement about seeing what the Ben Johnson offense looks like, seeing how Caleb Williams looks in year 2 under better head coaching, seeing what all the new pieces, Holston Loveland and Luther Burden, look like with Caleb Williams in the offense. We saw both of those guys last week, and they both played not too long. I thought Burden had some great veteran presence of getting out of bounds when he needed to save some clock and fighting for extra yards on long third down. But seeing what those guys look like around Caleb is obviously going to be a lot different than what they look like around Tyson Bagent, and no slander on him. With that said, the offense is still going to be fairly vanilla. We expect to see a lot of different, I don't want to say trick plays, but offensive innovation under Ben Johnson, and that's probably not going to be the case on Sunday night. It's going to be a lot of very simple offensive looks. I would assume a lot of 12 personnel with Cole Kmet and Loveland there, but it's not going to be the Jared Goff fakes the fumble and throws a deep ball. It's going to be their base looks and offensive and passing, but probably not a lot of complicated route setups. Probably some pretty standard inside-outside zones and pulling, but nothing that you're really saving for an opponent, like a divisional opponent down the line here. So just the nature of the beast, however they play, there's going to be takeaways one way or the other. If they struggle, I would just pump the brakes on everything and just say this is not the offense that we're going to see throughout the season, just because it's going to be much more complex. And those guys have really said it to that effect that week 1 even of the regular season isn't going to be what it looks like week 18, just because the playbook is so deep and complex and layered that it's not going to take a 23-year-old 6 weeks of training camp or whatever it is just to come in and learn it right away. So with Chicago and quarterbacks, it's always a tendency to just get super overdramatic, but pump the brakes and see how this thing develops here, because I think it really does have a chance to get really cool, but it's not going to help if people are just losing their minds on the radio and in newspapers and everything, and on Twitter, obviously. And then that last offensive thing for the Bears, just that left tackle competition is really starting to heat up. It looks like 2-man race between Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapillo. I know Theo Benedict and Kieran Amagaji have gotten looks on both sides of the ball now, turning into swing tackle death pieces, but Sunday's going to tell us a lot about what that tackle competition looks like and who has the edge in that. Whoever starts that game is probably the leader in the clubhouse to be the left tackle one. I would say probably as of right now, that's Jones, just because he has, if nothing else, the experience on Trapillo, who's obviously a rookie, and Jones has been in the league and started at left tackle for a few years here. So they want more out of Jones, and the Bears O-line coach has said to that effect. We want more consistency and for him to be better. Lower body, upper body, getting to a spot, finishing out blocks, but he does have the edge because he's actually been there and done it before. Not that Trapillo isn't capable of that, but experience is such a valuable thing to have when you're talking about football and for many different things as well. But the fact that Jones has actually been back there and has faced some of these guys in the NFL is probably a really good sign. And then switching over to the Bears' defensive side of the ball, seeing if they can match that energy against the Dolphins. They played so fast and strong and passionate on the defensive side of the ball, even against the Dolphins number ones. And the Bears will have some ones out there, but seeing if those guys who have made some money and are well established can kind of play with that same fire. You don't want them going 100 miles per hour maybe in the preseason, but seeing if they get put in those situations of a third, fourth, and short, can they step up to that challenge? And against a really good Bills O-line too, which I don't know how many players they'll start on the O-line there, but they had a pretty good performance last week. And then the big thing with the Bills offense, we're going to see Mitch Trubisky at Soldier Field, which is always a treat. It didn't work out long term with the Bears there, but he had some pretty good plays last week. He had that one really nice roll to his weak side and then throw away from his body and make the play. And he's a more than competent backup quarterback. Do the Bills want to see him play 15 games? No, because that means Josh Allen got seriously hurt at some point. But if he has to come in and close up a game or play 2 or 3 games, I think they're more than comfortable with that. So it'll be good to see him in Chicago. I hope nobody rises him, too hard, especially from the fan side. But always gonna be fun to see Trubisky down at Soldier Field. And then game number 5 here, Bengals at the Commanders on Monday Night Football. Again, I don't know when we started doing Monday night preseason games. That seems a little crazy and maybe a detriment to both team schedules. But another good test of that Bengals defense, who really struggled against the Eagles backups last week. The Commanders, I don't know if they're going to start everybody, but they've indicated that they're going to start a lot of players. So maybe it's our first look at the newcomers for Jaden Daniels, like Lambert Tunsil at tackle and Deebo Samuel, who they got at receiver. Those guys are both veterans, so it wouldn't be super surprising if they didn't play, but hopefully we can see them at least for a drive or two and see what that new look offense is going to look like for this fall. But for the Bengals D, they really struggled against Philadelphia last week, and I just think with Trey Hendrickson, one of the best defensive ends in the NFL, sitting out for a contract, what's going through his mind seeing this stuff in the preseason? A part of him, I'm sure, is broken up because his teammates are suffering from him not being there, but the price is going up the more they struggle without him. It's some good leverage to say, we will be better than this if you pay me and you bring me back here as soon as possible. So I expect them to be a little better than they were last week just because they really struggled, but definitely looking to see how they play. And then for that Bengals, can they just put up another big performance? They really want to hit the ground running in the season, it looks like, and they've got the right guys to do it between Burrow and then Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But if they can hit week 1 and really explode, that would be great. They lost that week 1 game against the Patriots last year, who ended up being one of the worst teams. And frankly, if they would have won that game, the Bengals are probably a playoff team and don't need the whole circus of this team to win and this team to lose in the last week to make it even. So they understand the importance of not losing the first 3 games of the year. So hopefully a good performance and kind of get that ship going in the right direction. And even if the defense is struggling, the offense is already in midseason form to the point where they can carry them for a game or 2 or 3 or however long it takes for that defense to really step up. Hendrickson is going to come back at some point potentially, and it might take him a little bit. And Shamar Stewart's a big piece of that D-line, and he might not be a great, NFL caliber edge rusher week 1, but he's going to be a difference maker eventually, and it might be at a time where the offense needs the defense to step up more and they can potentially carry the team a little bit throughout the early part of the season. So those are my 5 games that I'm really clued in on this weekend. Just wanted to go on some NFL legal cases. So we'll start with Quinshon Judkins, who was the draft pick for the Cleveland Browns at running back out of Ohio State. He was arrested in July for an alleged domestic incident. He will not face charges. They found Thursday. So he was not captured on video. There was a delayed report of the incident. Mismatching evidence was reported about bodily harm and the timeline for that. They said it happened 5 days before it was reported, but, you should have reported on that day potentially. So I'm not going to say, he's innocent, he's guilty, but he will not face charges. It seems like they are dropped, and he is going to be able to rejoin the team. So he was the final draft pick to not be signed by the team that drafted him. That'll get done, and he'll be a Cleveland Brown here and join the team as soon as possible. Rashee Rice, the Chiefs receiver, was sentenced last month to 30 days in jail, which can be served over 5 years, and then 5 years of probation. So he pleaded guilty to 2 third-degree felony charges, racing on highway causing bodily harm, and then collision involving serious bodily injury. So we all know the racing incident that happened a while back, and the legal proceeding took place, and then the big news here is that the disciplinary review is going to be heard on September 30th, so he's going to be able to play the first 4 weeks at least. Those games are the Chargers, Eagles, Giants, and Ravens. Giants not so much, but our team's 3 pretty big games. Divisional opponent to start it off. Super Bowl rematch week 2, and then the Ravens Chiefs is always a big game week 4 there. So a little disappointed by the fact that just the timeline would make you feel like the NFL is okay with having him for important games, but then once the season gets underway, pulling him off the field and figuring out the situation there. Obviously, any game the Chiefs are in, they're going to be a talked about game just because they went to 3 Super Bowls in a row and only lost one of them. But is the NFL taking advantage of the situation and protecting him from missing what they consider to be important games early on? And then the last bit of news here from players: Isaiah Bond, the undrafted Texas receiver, faced sexual assault charges and has been no billed, no longer facing charges. He was arrested 2 weeks before the draft, was going to be a day 2 pick, went undrafted because of just this entire situation. Nobody really knew what was going on. But it looks like he's going to not face any consequences legally, will not be indicted. So he announced that he's set to sign with the Cleveland Browns. No deal has officially been done as of the taping of this episode. I don't think he's lying about that. That'd be a really foolish way to go about it. And like I said, a talented player coming out of Texas. Teams just got a little scared to touch that situation just with everything going on at the time of the draft. But it looks like he is going to have an opportunity to join in camp late, so the chances that he makes the team are probably a little lower than if he would have been able to join them earlier. Cleveland doesn't have the best receiving room, so it's not like he's going to the Vikings or the Eagles or somebody that have a lot of receivers already set to make the team. So from that standpoint, it's not the worst setup. But just for all 3 of these players, obviously very different levels of the alleged crime committed, the findings of a court, the severity of their punishment. Just hope this can become a learning experience for all 3 of them, even if they didn't do anything wrong, how to avoid those situations where anything is indeterminable and accusationable, and just being able to understand that you do have a target on your back, and for right or wrong, people are going to look at that. But then a couple coaching stories here. John Gruden resigned from the Raiders after a 3-1 start in 2021 based on the leaking of emails where he had some racist, sexist, anti-gay sentiments and also Roger Goodell sentiments, but he went to the Nevada Supreme Court and basically sued against the NFL, saying that they leaked all his info, and the Nevada Supreme Court agreed with him. So the NFL is gonna appeal it, but if it goes any further, it'll actually become a U.S. Supreme Court hearing topic. So we could have Roger Goodell from the NFL versus John Gruden in Washington, D.C. pretty soon here. Not going to defend anything that he said about Goodell or any marginalized group of society, but definitely an infringement on his privacy to have private emails leaked to the public and to league officials. So a situation where no one seems to be in the right here, but hopefully Gruden can learn from those mistakes and act and behave differently going forward. He's got an internet career of his own, so hopefully he's seen the light and has realized that you can't be doing the stuff that he was doing, regardless of whether they leak it or not. And then Brian Flores, Vikings D coordinator, another guy who's in the middle of suing the NFL. Federal appeals court ruled that the NFL can be put on trial for racial discrimination against Flores and other minority coaches. So this dates back to when he interviewed with a couple teams, the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, and the Houston Texans, who were all part of this lawsuit. And Flores alleges that he was used basically as a checkoff like new rule candidate, and he was never really taken seriously as a potential head coach, and was really just there so that they could say they got a minority coach in and move on. Specifically with the Giants, I know there's controversy that the team had already decided they were going to hire Daboll 3 days prior to interviewing Flores. And it goes back to Bill Belichick, if you remember, where there was a leaked text where he had texted Brian Flores congratulating him on the job, actually meant to text Daboll, but Flores hadn't even interviewed for the job yet. So it's a whole mess. The Rooney Rule is definitely an imperfect system to promote diversity amongst NFL head coaches, which I'm all for. You look at the racial breakdown of the NFL players and then the inequality of that breakdown in the coaches, and it's definitely aggravating to see just how few coaches are minorities. But I think the Rooney Rule has done a little bit better job in recent years, just because now they reward teams for getting a candidate hired by a different team to a promotion. So I think that's a better way to do it, to reward teams rather than just the way that it used to be. But there might be still a problem with mandating that teams have to interview minorities, just because you get situations like this. And it's a similar situation that the Patriots were in this past season, where they were probably going to hire Vrabel, and then They ended up interviewing, I believe, Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton late in the process, kind of just to check that box. So definitely an ongoing problem and one that the league should probably look at. Going on to the Cubs here, they lost against the Blue Jays in Toronto 2-1, capped off by a 2-1 loss on Thursday. Just a couple notes from the series. The big storyline in my eyes, Miguel Amaya, that injury in his first game back from his 60-day IL stint on Wednesday. Just heartbreaking. Thankfully, he reportedly avoided a big injury and supposedly just had a sprained ankle. That's going to take some time to recover, but the X-rays came back negative and doesn't seem to be any ligament damage, which again is great, but definitely a super sad scene when they had to cart him off and he had the towel in his face, just bawling, I'm sure. But in a corresponding move, the Cubs brought up Owen Casey from the minor league team for Thursday. He was acquired from the Padres in 2020 for Yu Darvish, part of that trade. Total masher, complete offensive outfielder, so his place in the team probably won't be in center field long term, but he played DH in his debut, so he didn't have to worry about that. And a different type of sad than the Amaya injury, but his first at bat was also kind of sad because he is a Canadian. He's miles away from where he grew up. He's facing against Max Scherzer, who's one of the best, pitchers over the past 20 years, if not ever. And he's about to get a hit on him, and then outfielder Davis Schneider just makes an absolute crazy play over his shoulder to catch it and rob him of his first hit. And he didn't get a hit the rest of the game, but was so close to making a big moment. Again, very close to where he grew up and against one of the best players in the history of the game. So I'm looking for him to continue to make some strides and check off some of the first hit, first home run. I'm sure they'll come here in quick order, but definitely a sad way for his first at-bat to end. A couple of guys I want to highlight. I don't want to do the whole negative Cubs thing. Matt Shaw, 3 home runs in his last 4 games. And I think a really good defensive infielder. He's really mastered that short hopper to third and being super aggressive and pouncing it and whipping over the first. I've really noticed that any ball coming to him, he just jumps on, which is great. Really stepped up on offense. Had like a stretch of not great batting before the deadline, and I know there's some talk about getting a different third baseman in there, and they stuck with him, and I think he's proving that that's the right decision. But he needs to be moved up in the lineup. He was the only hitter on Thursday to not get 4 plate appearances, which is crazy because he's probably the hottest hitter on the team right now. He's doing really well, and hopefully he can kind of help some of those veterans get out of their funk a little bit. Another guy who has been great on defense, maybe not so much on offense, but Willie Castro. They acquired him from the Twins at deadline. And he's already played all over. He's played third base, second base, all the outfield positions. I know in Jeff Passan's tweet, he called him a super utility man, and he's kind of proven to be exactly like that. Struggling on O, who isn't right now. Just a great defensive piece and a depth piece and a player that can give different guys nights off and give options in the infield and the outfield and move guys around. I think that's going to end up being a great addition to this team and one that could really help them in the playoffs. And then Michael Busch, another player, really, really good. 3 homers in his last 5 games. One of the few guys who's not really in a slump right now. And just a really good defensive first baseman. So he's another player that is probably going to need to pick up a little bit more of slack as guys struggle here, but he's kind of up to the plate. And then Nico Horner, he's not the best player on the team, but he's just consistent and flat and doesn't really have a bunch of up and downs. I think that's really important. And then the Cubs pitchers, I think, have been really good. Cade Horton was an out away from setting the scoreless inning streak as a rookie in MLB history, so historically strong start for him in his first year. Michael Boyd had a great Thursday start until homer against Vladdy, but he's been really great and kind of a surprising year. And then Shota, I know he's had a couple of games that have been not so great here over the past month or two, but between those 3 top guys, I think that's a really strong rotation. And then Jameson Taillon and Mike Soroka, who Soroka they acquired and then he got hurt in his first game. Those guys are kind of set to return in the near future. So I think the pitching staff pretty soon here is going to be kind of 100% and might be kind of key to winning some games, even if some offensive guys are struggling here. But looking at the near future for the Cubs, you got 3-game series against the Pirates, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then that big 5 games over 4 days against the Brewers. So they got the doubleheader Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday games. So I know the Brewers are like the hottest team ever to exist, basically. It'd be impossible to expect the Cubs to go 5-0, but if by the grace of God they could somehow win that series, that would really put a dent into their race for the Central, which is probably out of the question now, but just to get some bragging rights back and some mojo back to the team, I think will be really important. Last sports topic here, not really a sports topic, more of the intersection of sports and culture. Just what everyone's talking about, Taylor Swift going on the New Heights podcast. So I looked at the stats, 6 p.m. on Thursday, so these will all already have gone up by then, but 12.8 million views, 550K plus likes, and then 60 comments. 36K plus comments. They had 1.3 million concurrent YouTube views, which was the most ever. And Swift came on and she announced a new album, Life of a Showgirl, which is coming out later this fall. I haven't seen the whole thing. I probably will watch it at some point, but I saw a couple clips here and there. I thought it was really cool. There was a lot of talk about people being a little annoyed with Swift, and I thought she handled that really well. She kind of said, I know people are asking for more Taylor Swift and being really sarcastic about it, but she's one of the handful of biggest celebrities in the world, and they do a cross promotion where people who might not listen to Taylor Swift see her more, and people who might not watch NFL football see two great ambassadors, the Kelsey brothers, talk about that. I think it's really cool for both sides to grow both those fields. So overall, like I said, I haven't watched it yet, probably will at some point, but it was really cool to see them leverage each other a little bit in a really positive way to promote both of their things and grow that show's name and get Taylor Swift in front of a new audience. The one funny thing I did see on Twitter, and it's so true, the split screen of Swift and Travis together is very similar to the SNL Weekend Update bit where they do Marcelo Hernandez and Jane Wickline as the couple you couldn't believe are together, and Marcelo is wearing the football jersey and Jane Wickline is a shy, like artsy, dorky girl. So someone said that that's like the same thing, and it's very true. It's a funny visual, but they seem to be happy, obviously, so I'm not going to bash it at all. It's cool to see them getting involved in each other's worlds, and for the better, really. And then going down to our media review here, on Wednesday night, I watched Wayne's World on Netflix, so a movie that was based on SNL skit, and then they broke it out into a full movie with Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and just a slew of celebrity cameos. But before I even talk about like my favorite parts of the movie, just the first thing I thought of was, why don't SNL skits break out into movies anymore? This was a thing for a very long time between like Blues Brothers and Night at the Roxbury. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is just because a couple of those like kind of flopped in the later stages there. But two, and maybe most importantly, I think that skits from the SNL world are just so oversaturated by being played on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and everything that these are so over and over and over and over again that the point of doing a movie is kind of dead at that point. With Marcelo Hernandez's character, where he comes in singing, they did like a sequel to that within weeks of debuting that character, which they don't really do in years past. So I think just the kind of way that the show and the media landscape works now, it doesn't really make sense to do a movie like this anymore. But I really liked it. Wayne's World perfectly encapsulates like the vibe of like an early 1990s thing. Obviously, I wasn't alive for that, but they hit like some, the hair and the outfits and the music and everything really well. So Wayne is Mike Myers, and then Garth is Dana Carvey, and they run a local late night television show out of Aurora, Illinois, Chicago suburb, and then they get signed to a bigger deal. And there's some problems with that, obviously, but it's just kind of seeing them break out into the mainstream media a little bit. And there's some really funny bits in there. Wayne picks up on a girl who's a bass player, and she speaks Cantonese, so he wants to impress her, and he learns Cantonese like within a week, and he's pretty fluent in that. They talk at one point with the studio about not doing gratuitous ad segments in their show, and that they want to avoid sponsorships. And as they're doing that in the movie, they're showing sponsorship for Pizza Hut and Domino's and Reebok and Newprint and Pepsi and everything they can get their hands on. So really funny moment to satirize the whole product placement element of TV and movies. And then both their accents are just really funny. I think Garth especially, his accent's kind of like the precursor to the Californian skit where they go like, "What are you doing here?" And Garth really speaks like that in the entire movie, and everything he says is just so crazy to listen to. It's really funny, but hilarious movie. Could not recommend it enough. Definitely not a movie that's going to win any awards or anything, but one of those hallmark movies of a certain time period that you kind of have to watch. And I'm glad I did. So I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. Like I said, it's on Netflix. I think it will be there for a little bit. It didn't have the going away tag on it or anything. So again, would highly recommend that. So that's it for this episode. I'll be back Tuesday to recap this week. I'll promise you guys that I actually do put something up in the walls behind me. I know I've talked about that for a while, but the Sammy Sosa poster will be up, and probably a Cubs flag will be up as well. So that's it for me. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys Tuesday. Bye.